All right. So this is part two of why weak women are such a huge threat to the world. And it's entirely because of weak men. In the end, it comes down to men needing to step up because the unfortunate side is that women aren't going to do it for the most part. I've heard a quote recently that I've been thinking a lot about. People like to talk about how women mature faster than men, but I don't know necessarily know if that's true. I think physically it is, but mentally and emotionally, it doesn't appear to be. And I've seen someone else, I don't recall who said it, but someone else said they might mature faster than men, but they get stuck at 15, which I think is kind of hilarious and describes a lot of the women I know. It's just like pathetic, childish, a million excuses for everything. And I think I know a lot of people are going to take this the wrong way, but this is ironically a pro woman post. And if you would set aside your ego and take a moment to actually dissolve the words I'm speaking instead of letting the demons in your head get triggered and feed on your fears and insecurities, then you would understand that. I'm going to harken back to the quote I said in the first part. Behind every great man, there's an even greater woman rolling her eyes. So, how do weak women and weak men ruin societies, cause the downfall of entire nations? Well, one is that despite how much women like to portray men as being sex obsessed pigs, it's actually women that are the more sex obsessed of the two sexes. Now, ask yourself, who buys and has more sex toys made for them? Just think about that. Um, I don't even need to Google it, but I probably should have because maybe I'm wrong. But I'd be willing to bet that if you were to do an analysis of the sex toy economy, the vast majority of sex toys are made and sold to women. I think there is a reckoning for women coming down the pipe. And if we don't find some kind of balance, it's going to be terrible. Because historically, women have absolutely been abused and disrespected by so many societies. It's still happening in a lot of different societies around the world. And I'm not going to throw shade at any particular culture, but you know which ones I'm speaking of. I think one of the greatest things about America is that women have the right to free speech, the right to vote. They have all the same rights as men. I think that is absolutely beautiful and necessary for a healthy society. I believe that women and men were always meant to be partners. That is how it's supposed to be. The differences between women and men aren't things to be upset about. They're things to celebrate. I get so annoyed when people refuse to acknowledge that men are faster and stronger, but women are more emotionally attuned. That is by design, right? Men are meant to go to war and die on the front lines to protect the tribe. Women are there to heal the tribe, to provide the cradle of life. There are, and I'm not, this isn't some weird like birther thing either. If you are a woman and you decide not to have children, that is absolutely your prerogative, right? But the fact that we live in a society that has not only diminished the honor of being a mother, but let alone what word am I looking for? There are people that see being a mother as a negative thing in today's society. And I don't understand that. It is the most powerful gift given to women. No matter what the media might try to tell you, men can't get pregnant. And raising and creating life in such a manner is a truly gift, is a truly divine gift. That's the word I'm looking for. Still not getting sleep. So the brain to tongue connection isn't exactly fully there right now. I think the most important thing we can do if we want to save America, and by extension, the world, and this isn't some weird American exceptionalism, ultra nationalism thing. It's just zooming out and looking at patterns throughout history and the outsized effect that American culture has had on the entire rest of the world. You know, people talk about how, like, all the insane hedonism going on in Dubai with like the gold plated cars and all that stuff. That is American culture just turned up to the nth degree by all the oil money they have over there. You know, I'm not saying that UAE doesn't have their own culture. They have a deep, rich historical culture. And just like any ancient culture like that, there have been dark periods and inspiring periods of it, you know? But to have a celebration where it's a whole bunch of American comics, ironically, some who have openly criticized billionaires and then go and take a paycheck from those same billionaires. We're not going to go on that. That's another topic for another video. But I will say that I think I have no problem with most of those people going to accept that paycheck. But I do think Bill Burr lost whatever credibility he had left when he did that specifically. Um, I think that's a good example of what I was talking about in the first video, where people don't have any backbone anymore, and they're willing to tolerate things that they shouldn't, either because the paycheck is big enough or the social pressure is big enough. And That's why both weak women and weak men are destroying society. The primary reason that weak men create hard times isn't because they aren't willing to go to war. It isn't because they aren't really willing to go to work. It's because they aren't willing to say no to weak women. Saying no is one of the most important superpowers you can have. And it's something that for most of my life, I wasn't really capable of doing. Not specifically to women, but just to everyone in general. I've never really been a people pleaser type. I don't really care what people think about me in the great scheme of things, but I've always just been the guy that wants to fix everything, you know? So if someone told me they needed help with something, I would just say, yeah, I'll help you. And I poured all of my energy into a whole bunch of people that never poured anything back into me. And even worse than that, when I was down and out and actually needed help, they became some of the worst people to be around. The same people that I did so much for would say, oh, you did all this to help other people. Why can't you help yourself? When what they really should have said is, you did all this to help me. It's time that I have your back. Now, I want to be clear. I never did any of that, and I never do any of that expecting anything in return. I feel like that is one of the most toxic things you can possibly be. I despise sycophants just as much as I despise hypocrites and liars, right? I feel like using good deeds for personal benefit or to gain access or improve your social standing is one of the most evil things you can do. It really frustrates me to see a lot of these content creators that go around doing charity, but then are actually evil people behind the scenes that just are doing it all for attention and views in the end. Weak men, weak women. I could go on a whole rant about OnlyFans during this, but I don't want to make this 2 hours long, you know? Uh, Suffice it to say, I think that is the largest platform where you will find a collection of weak women. And the people who contribute to that are almost entirely weak men. The thing that really annoys me the most is the whole dating situation where both weak women and weak men will complain about their own weakness but blame it on the other sex, right? You have these women that are going after the soulless fuckboys that um, get this guy to start dating them by cheating on their current girlfriend, and then they act all surprised when they get cheated on. And it's like, well, once a cheater, always a cheater. If he cheats to be with you, he's going to cheat on you. It's just one of those things. And you'd think they'd learn their lesson and stop going for these degenerate fake fuckboys, but no, they just keep going over and over again to the same degenerate weirdos, and then they get mad and they play the victim when they turn out to be a degenerate weirdo, even though they only date degenerate weirdos. Grow the fuck up. On the flip side, you have these damn incels that like subscribe to 100 different OnlyFans, or they just end up being on like some weird looks maxing forum or something, and they just obsess over these slutty, utterly soulless women, and they're like, I don't get why she's only interested in me for my money and my looks, because you keep going after these women that are only interested in your money and your looks, and you specifically cultivated yourself to be attractive to those type of women. What would you fucking expect, you goddamn idiot? I think the divide between men and women is the biggest thing that is leading to the downfall of our society. And unfortunately, I don't like to place blame on anyone, but this is going to be the year of accountability. And it seems that women are mostly responsible for it. Now, there are a lot of weak men, and I think overall, weak men have to learn to say no is the most important thing to fixing this, because the whole reason that these weak women have been allowed to influence the culture in such a way is that weak men don't say no. And that's why weak men create hard times. They say there are three things that motivate men: profit, pussy, and power. The three P's. But one of the things that a lot of people don't pay attention to is that profit and power often end up just being a means to the end of pussy. Most men are motivated primarily either because of their interest in women or because they want women to be interested in them. So I would say probably 80% of it is pussy, as far as like the overall general population of the world. And then 10% of men mostly care about the power, and then 10% of men mostly care about the profit. You know, and that might not be an exact breakdown, but those are my overall estimates, because the rest of those people that are seeking profit or power, they're doing it with the end goal of getting that pussy. So, how do we fix it? Well, one, we need to learn to say no, both men and women, but women seem to have a lot more difficulty at saying no. And why do I say women hold the larger share of responsibility in why things went wrong, even though it's men's job to fix it? So there's an open secret that I've said a few times and no one ever seems to acknowledge. Men may run the world, but women rule it, because there's two things that are so supremely obvious to me. If you look at some of the most powerful men in the world, the patriarchy, so to speak, every single one of them has a powerful woman at their side whispering in their ear, and just about every single one of them will at multiple times say there were things they would do but their woman wouldn't allow them, right? You have Obama and Michelle, which is, I realized afterwards that like that's both their last names. You have Barack and Michelle. You have Donald and Melania. I don't know how to say most of these names. I hope I'm not butchering anyone's name. You have Bill and Hillary. You had Epstein and Ghislaine, whatever the fuck that name is. Every single one of these powerful men had a powerful woman who was whispering in their ear the entire time and influencing them endlessly. Even after Maxwell and Epstein broke up, she was the one that was still recruiting those young girls through the massage parlor and sending them off to him. She fed that sickness within him because for whatever reason, she was getting something out of it. So that is the first point that you need to pay attention to. That statement that I said earlier, I'm going to say it again. Behind every great man, there's an even greater woman rolling her eyes. It's really windy up here. We're getting hit by another snowstorm. It hasn't started snowing yet, but the storm part of it is here. I think there's someone at the door, actually. 1 second. No one at the door. It just seemed like the front outside like glass door part wasn't fully latched, and even though it's a really strong auto close device, the wind was strong enough to open that up and keep it propped open. I'm kind of paranoid right now because there are what appear to be human footsteps wandering around the snow in my backyard. Now I can't tell if it's a deer or anything. I haven't been out there to look at it, but they definitely look like boot prints. And I'm curious why someone was wandering around in my backyard last night. Maybe they're already planning to silence me. I don't know. But I joke, but I do expect that eventually there will be consequences for speaking the truth so blatantly. My point is, it works both ways. The same way that great women will make a great man even greater, weak women will make a weak man even weaker. The second aspect of it, the second piece of evidence, rather, that I would supply is, again, the first being that when you look at all the most powerful men in the world, the patriarchy, so to speak, each one of these men is actually ruled by a woman. The second aspect is, and it's an old Voltaire quote, I believe, if you want to know who your rulers are, just look at who you're not allowed to criticize. And I don't think that's the exact quote. Someone please provide the exact quote in the comments. But it is very apparent, especially when you look at online discourse and these AI models. There was a thing a while ago, I don't know if it's still this way, but ChatGPT, when prompted to make a joke about a woman, would say it's not allowed to do that because that would be sexist. But when prompted to make a joke about a man, it would do it immediately. If you want to know who's in charge, just look at who you're not allowed to criticize. The same thing happens with these online forums, with social media in general. And if you look at most modern economies, they are fed primarily by women. The fashion industry is one of the largest industries in the world, and that's primarily fed by women. The makeup industry is one of the largest industries in the world, and that's almost exclusively fed by women. The nightclubs let women in for free and have women's nights, but men always have to pay full price. This is why I am worried that there is going to be a reckoning for women. And I don't mean that in a good way. Reckonings can often be good, but I feel like there will be an outsized backlash to the point where we may even see the erosion of some women's rights. And there are people that are calling for that. I can't comprehend it, but there's that stupid girl, Just Pearly Things, or whatever, who is against women's right to vote. I think instead of taking rights away from people, we just need to teach people to be better, to actually fix the problems with society. Maybe I'm a fool and there's too much hope for that. I have to admit, I'm starting to believe the experiment of democracy is failing, but simply taking away women's right to vote wouldn't fix anything, even though women seem to be the ones causing most of the problems right now. And I'll get to the piece of evidence that I have for that in a moment, because they would still have an outsized influence on the men in their lives. And oftentimes, men are convinced to vote a certain way or to think a certain way by their women. I said great men have great women behind them, and weak men have weak women behind them. And I think a perfect example of this is the iDubbbz situation, where he was one of the OG YouTubers. He inspired so many people to get started with content creation. Ethan Klein and him used to be so close that he once called Ethan Klein his best friend. And now, at the behest of a titty streamer turned OnlyFans girl, he does nothing but destroy his own life and reputation and is beefing endlessly with the one man he once called his best friend. By contrast, look at the way that Hila, I believe is how you pronounce it, supports Ethan. I want to be clear. I, for many years, didn't really like Ethan all that much. I thought he was funny in college when he did the basic React videos. Him and Hila were hilarious. They have such a cute little couple dynamic, but I don't really agree with a lot of their politics. What I do agree with is that we need to have these conversations. We need to be able to talk with each other peacefully without just shouting each other down with a bunch of crazy evil names or ad hominem attacks that have no basis in reality. The fact that Hassan is calling Ethan anti-Semitic when he's literally like, it's just stupid. It's so stupid, I can't even put it into words. All right, let me reset and finish up. I think the only way for us to fix this society before it crumbles entirely is for men to learn to say no. That is really the true strength of a strong man, is to say no to weak men, and to say no to weak women. Dude, I just need to get good sleep for once this year, please. We'll just replace sleep with caffeine, I guess. All right, so I think it is really supremely important that people learn to have principles again, because no one has principles anymore. Everything is just moral relativism, which means that nothing matters because anything can be morally justified if you spin it hard enough. And this is where I come to the final piece of evidence that I believe women are causing most of the problems and weak men are allowing it to happen. Why do I think it's men's job to fix it, and why do I think men are allowing it to happen? Primarily because of the way men internalize and contend with emotions differently. Men are the rock, women are the wind, right? If you consider society as a ship, it is men that provide the anchor, the sturdiness of the hull that keeps the ship safe during a storm or grounded while at harbor. Not necessarily grounded, but anchored while at harbor. But the anchor keeps things anchored. That's a little, it's not as, dude, I can't fucking talk. Anyways, hopefully you get the point. If you don't, this video isn't intended for you. Go watch an AI video of an octopus selling sushi on the street. Women, because of the way their mind works, with endless things constantly swirling inside, they really provide the fuel that pushes society in certain directions. So if society is moving in a direction you don't like, it's probably because women are pushing it in that direction and men aren't strong enough to say no. And that is how weak men create hard times, because they don't keep the hysteria. And I'm borrowing that from a Poppy song. Just look up Hysteria Poppy and maybe it will help provide you some insight. They don't keep the hysteria of women in check. And strong, good women, they realize that hysteria is their weakness, and they look for a strong man who has the good sense and the spine to say no. Men keep women grounded, and women spur men into action. Because let's be real, every decent man, if left to his own devices, would sit on his back porch for 5 hours sipping coffee and staring out at the woods with nothing going on in his brain, or would go on a 5-month fishing trip and just probably never come back, you know? And it's not laziness, mind you, because a lot of people would confuse that for laziness, but it's peace seeking behavior, right? We find peace in nature. We find peace in looking at the clouds, at watching a family of deer walk past. Now, at the same time, we're built for war as a necessity of survival. When our tribe is hungry, that same family of deer that we will let walk by peacefully, we will slaughter without a second thought to provide food or clothing to protect our tribe. And where does our tribe come from? It comes from the womb of the woman. And because of that, women have this extraordinarily influential pressure to force men, or at the very least to prod them into action. I think one of the best examples of the differences between women and men were from Joe Budden's podcast. I'm pretty sure it was Joe Budden's podcast. I think it was, anyways. I think he was involved at the very least. People are watching this comedian up there, and the guy's talking about the Garden of Eden. He's saying something like, look at this. We have all the food we could ever need. We have God watching over us and protecting us. There's no war. There's no strife. There's no drama. And the woman said, yeah, but it's not enough. And so she got them kicked out of the Garden of Eden. And all the guys, there's like 3 of them there, are laughing their asses off. The comedian was way better at delivering it than I am. Just Google it. I'm not a stand-up comedian. I've said this multiple times. I'm a philosopher. I know my lane, so I stay in it. All the guys are busting a gut laughing. They think it's the funniest thing. And the woman just has this like scrunched up face. And she's like, I don't get it. And I think Joe Budden or one of the other guys is like, well, what is it that you don't get? And she was like, I don't know. I was just expecting more. And all the guys start laughing even harder because they're like, that was the point. That was the joke. Men have this ability to be content with very little. And if you ever find a man that's not content with very little, then there's 2 things going on there. Either he never grew up to become a man and is just a childish, selfish little boy that can't control or confront his own demons and has let them take over his mind, or there is something that is disrupting his peace. I think there is another video that probably epitomizes this even better. Women love to say that men don't open up emotionally, and the primary reason that men don't open up emotionally is because women punish them when they do. There is this video of a guy who's just sitting down, staring at this spool of wire. And you can tell he's deep in his feels. And his wife, his own wife, the person who should be on his side and back him up more than anyone else, shuts him down entirely, makes him feel like a worthless piece of shit. She comes out and she's like, "Hey, I'm just coming to check on you." No, she's not, because she's recording the whole thing. She's doing this all for views and attention. If she were really just coming to check on him, she would have done this all off camera. But she's fucking lying. And she says, "You've been out here for a while. I wonder what's going on." He's like, "You see this spool of wire? I've had this for 40 years and it's almost gone. 40 years of my life is represented by the missing wire." And instead of listening to what he's actually saying, she just starts making fun of him. So he immediately dissociates and goes back to work. Why is that? Because men have two modes. It's either peace or war. We don't have multiple modes like women do, and we don't end up in these partial states like women do, where there's a million different things bouncing around our brains. We just sort of tunnel on one thing at a time. That's why we can sit there on a porch staring at the woods for 6 hours and do nothing. That's also why we can go and stream for 20 hours or spend insane amounts of time building a business. It's because we have two modes, peace and war, and we flip between them. And in the modern society, work is war, right? Regardless of what the size of our tribe is, whether it's a single man simply putting the food on the table for himself, or whether it is a CEO leading a company, work is war, because that man has a responsibility to himself and all those other people to provide. And he does that through work. So when she shuts him down, destroys his moment of peace, he disassociates from his feelings and goes back to work. Instead of contemplating on the depth, the extreme moment of emotion that spool of wire allowed him to appreciate, he just disassociates from his feelings entirely and goes back to work because she destroyed his peace. So if you find a man that is constantly working, that is constantly at war with the world, it's because he can't find peace, because peace has been stolen from him. Meanwhile, women seem to be virtually incapable of finding and let alone comprehending peace. And I know this because I have had many conversations with many women, and they just can't comprehend the reason that men love peace and quiet so much. They need to always be making noise. And I have done my best to help some of these women understand it. And many of them have made great strides. I feel like the single most important thing we can do to fix society is to heal the divide between men and women and promote understanding and compassion. It all comes back to love in the end. Men need to learn to tolerate the hysteria of women, and women need to learn to tolerate the peace-seeking nature of men. Women need to give men space, and men need to provide grounding for women, because the ship will never sail correctly, and in fact, it will indeed sink if it can't learn to work with all the sails catching the wind and the anchor holding it steady in the proper time. During the most extreme storms, you furl the sails to prevent them ripping the mast off or capsizing the ship, and oftentimes will anchor if you can find a safe place to do so. We are going through a storm in our society right now. And the thing that worries me the most is that so many weak men are in positions of power. And rather than finding a way to seek balance and promote peace between men and women, these weak men want to subjugate women for their own dark desires. And it worries me that if strong men and strong women don't speak up against these weak men and weak women that are creating this situation, we are going to keep sliding down the wrong path. But I'm out of coffee now, and I believe I've said my piece. I got a little distracted a couple points, especially with the wind blowing around outside, making me think someone was trying to break into my house. But I hope this helped some people. Hope this helped. God, that is the most frustrating thing that the fucking Karens say. You know, when they say that, they don't mean it. When I said it, I meant it, but I try not to say that phrase anymore, because 99% of the time when you hear that, they don't want to help. They just want to cause pain and discomfort and chaos. If you want to talk more about anything I said in this video, come join me on Kick or Twitch later. I'll be live after I do some renovations around the house. All I have left to say at this point is delete Windows, de-Google yourself. I love all of you, and God bless America. The cup is empty, but I'm still going to cheers you anyways. Cheers. Kind of forgot my train of thought and forgot to include the most important part of evidence of why I feel it's primarily women that are causing the recent problems. If you look, there is a graph that indicates the political positions of men and women historically in the United States over many years. And if you watch, men have been consistent for decades. And it's only recently, when things started getting really crazy in this country, that you see this insane diversion of women just going to the extreme left. Like, men, and it's so interesting to watch. The graphs are like, as the country goes left, both men and women go left, and as the country go right, both men and women go right, and it's almost entirely matched, like across both men and women, with men being on average more right and women being on average more left. And then a few years ago, there was this massive divergence where there was another more right shift, but instead of continuing to follow the men right, the women took this insane U-turn, and ever since then have been going increasingly to the extremist left. And I have been doing a lot of observing numbers and trends over the past few years to see exactly why our country is falling apart and what's been causing the big issues. I look at things like college graduation rates and violent crime statistics, and I graph those things, and I notice new types of media always make things worse. You know, there was a specific dip with the invention of the radio, a specific dip with the widespread adoption of TV, a specific dip with the widespread adoption of the internet and Netflix and things like that. But I've never seen anything in the history of the country before like this insane divide that exists between men and women right now. And the reason why I'm saying that women are to blame for it is because the men, the statistics for them are consistent. It is the same pattern that has existed for centuries in this country. The only thing that's different when you look at the numbers is the women. Anyways, I gotta go do my workout, and that's just the final thing that I forgot to add as far as my specific reasons why I think women are causing most of the problems right now. But I'm going to, again, double down that I think the big issue isn't the women themselves, it's the fact that weak men have lost the ability to say no. All right, so I'm going to say no to being a fat fuck that just stuffs my face with ramen and whatever else I can get a hold of endlessly, and I'm going to go work out a bit. I love all of you. God bless America. Delete Windows and de-Google yourself. Peace.